digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we are led by a guest host.
digitaljamsessions.com.
Hi everyone, once again, welcome to Digital Jam Sessions. My name is Mookie Callahan and I'm with the lovely Jeremy and Carrie, and they're going to introduce themselves. We're back again covering for the brilliantly awesome Tanya Laird for Digital Jam Sessions. We're back again to cover our Immersive UK report, but for part 2. So if you were with us back in May to discuss part 1 of what this is all about, we are now with the insight experts and Carrie to kind of divulge into some of the questions that you wrote in your comments, some of the things that we've been thinking about as well. So we're going to kick off with some intros and then get right into it. So hello everyone, once again, I'm Mookie Callahan. I'm an executive digital producer covering all cross-platform productions, specializing in immersive content and R&D, and covering this Digital Jam session. And Jeremy, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Mookie. My name is Jeremy Tolson. I work as the head of VRAR at PwC UK. And what I do is I help clients across all industries understand and quantify the benefits of this wonderful technology.
The left brain is here. And Carrie, welcome. Your first Digital Jam session. I cannot believe this. This is brilliant.
No. Thank you for having me.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi everybody. My name's Carrie Wotton. I work for the Knowledge Transfer Network and we run Immerse UK. And Immerse UK is a cross-sector network for businesses and academics and individuals working in and with immersive technology, and we're funded through Innovate UK.
Brilliant. So if that wasn't confusing enough, don't worry, we're going to get right to it. So cracking on with this report, I think it's we were really excited to cover it, and I'm glad I think it was all meant to be. We did a part 1. So Carrie, why don't you just tell us how this report came about, who were the people behind it, and kind of describe the nuts and bolts of it in a guide for someone that maybe never heard of it before.
Yeah, essentially, the report came about because we at Immerse UK wanted to understand the market and to actually have some concrete evidence there. Some statistics, some information, some case studies to really underpin what we knew was happening in the market across the UK, but to actually put that in a concrete report. So yes, so we commissioned it at Immerse UK, and as I said, that's kind of run by the Knowledge Transfer Network, and it's been funded through Innovate UK, and we brought in partners to help us to deliver that report with MTM, Nesta, and Glass as well.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
And we were mentioning participants, and so within this report it describes. So if you were going to give a brief overview in a couple sentences of the kind of the way that you can layer this report and who it's meant to appeal to.
Yeah, so we've broken down those types of businesses who are utilising immersive technology. So there's a specialist group who they have over 50% of their turnover specifically being produced with immersive technology, whether that's their products or services, and participants is less than 50%. So there's a really clear distinction there, and I think that's really helpful to understand whether you're kind of at that participant or specialist level, where you sit within the market. And then we also have other category as well, which is those businesses that are kind of looking at immersive technology, but perhaps aren't getting any of their turnover specifically from that technology.
Right. So they're curious about it.
Yeah.
They're taking part in it, but they're really not sure which way to go.
And I think just, fundamentally on the bottom line, they're not actually generating any income from that. Yeah.
And does that mean they're using those immersive technologies as an operational tool within their organisation?
Yeah, possibly. And I think that's an interesting...
Like training and things like that.
I think that's a really interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because you might be creating products and services specifically with immersive technology, but you might also be using, as you say, very much be using them within your organisation, as you say, through training.
Yeah, training, HR, we've seen it come about, and we know that kind of training and educational elements
it's a really big,
is represented in here. So we know it's a massive cross-sector. So let's dive deep now, Jeremy. You ready? Let's geek out. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for geek out? Okay. Hashtag geek out. So what's been the industry reaction so far? And let's cover some of the sector and regions that we were chatting about earlier.
Yeah, sure. So for everyone who's got the report in front of them, and if you don't have it in front of them...
Oh, yeah, sorry. We might have told you where to find it.
You can download the report from our site, from immerseuk.org, so it's really easily kind of downloadable from there. So.
Yeah, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Immerseuk.org. Do it now while you're listening and follow along. We are on page 45.
Exactly. And the title, if anyone's just searching on Google, is The Immersive Economy in the UK.
Yeah.
So put that in, you'll be able to download it. On page 45, we are now looking at a map of the UK.
We're going to ruffle papers here for effect.
There's a lot of stuff happening here. Deep thought. But the idea here is that this figure 13, shows the location and level of research and development funding for immersive projects. Now, immediately, Carrie, what jumps out at me is the fact that at the bottom of the graph, the chart indicating the heat map on the UK, you've got London, which is clearly ahead of every single other city in the UK by a long way. Does that mean that London is the only place that matters for virtual reality and augmented reality, or is there another story there?
I think the answer to that is no. Absolutely not.
Good answer for other regions.
Just to be clear. No, the regions are fundamentally important to the UK market and play a vital role within the UK market. And I think just to be clear about this particular graph, this reflects the funding that those regions have drawn down. And I think that's probably a note back to us at the KTN and Innovate UK as well, to kind of really look at in more detail why those regions aren't drawing down those funding opportunities. And so, when we do when Innovate UK does, rolls out their funding opportunities, like Audience of the Future briefing sessions do happen across the UK. But I think that's for us to kind of investigate further. But absolutely no, the regions are crucial to the UK immersive economy, and we want to be supporting those regions and nations.
So what are we going to do for Bath? What are we going to do about Bath? It's a teeny tiny little...
Well, I think what is interesting about this graph, and I think more generally with the regions and where those hotspots are growing, is that there are quite a lot of hotspots. And I think that might be a surprise to people, that actually there's a community in Bath and they're drawing down funding for immersive technology, and Portsmouth and Reading, and places that perhaps you wouldn't have thought there would be an immersive community. And actually I think that's really exciting, and there's lots of potential for that. And as I say, this is specifically related to funding, but hopefully when we look at a report to get, hopefully fingers crossed we'll deliver this report again next year, that will have grown, and that actually there might be more regions. And I think that's quite exciting, that these communities of businesses and individuals utilising the technology are across the UK. There is a spread, and hopefully that will continue to grow as well.
And in fact, I'm just hypothesizing here, but what you may find after your investigation is that the figures on a per capita basis, in other words, divided by the number of people living in that city, may actually look quite good, or maybe even better than when you compare it to the London figures.
Yeah, very much so. So I think there as you say, there probably needs to be another analysis there. But I think that, for me, you're right. London is
on an absolute basis.
Particularly it's kind of
typical
very black
analyst
and white.
answer.
I mean, it's very black and white. But I think as I say, I think it's exciting that these places are drawing down some funding, and that this activity is happening. And I think they're not the big other cities. They're representative. But I think if you were to say them off the top of your head without looking at the statistics, you might have gone, those communities exist in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, in Manchester. Perhaps you'd say Bristol as well. But I think there's a really wide range there.
And not forgetting our Scottish and Welsh and Irish friends as well. Exactly. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. And as we know, this space changes so quickly. And if you did this report again in January, this, because I know it takes a long time to create these reports by the time, and we appreciate that. Don't just whip up some figures out of nowhere. It's like it'll change in a year's time. And I think if this report is able to be produced yearly, how amazing will that be to kind of see these graphs change and shift and move, and some of the underdogs, because I'm a massive supporter of the underdogs, as we all are here. So it's like finding.
And I was just going to say also, it's about where the cross-sector expertise lies within these regions and cities as well, and towns. Actually, you might, you'd say Manchester might be a more creative city, but actually you might find that it's more based around manufacturing. Or so do you know what I mean? That this graph needs to sit alongside some of that kind of cross-sector understanding.
Yeah, as well. Interesting. Who's going to work on that chart?
We'll add it in for next time.
Great potential for the future, and also the fact that you've done the methodology already and you've tested it and you've learned from it means that when you do, if you do repeat this, or when you do repeat this in the future, it will be far easier and far quicker, hopefully, to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's why we wanted to do this report to begin with. It was to give us that baseline information.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That we at Immersive UK believe that the economy is growing, and obviously PwC have done lots of reports around this, but we wanted to really put that baseline report down so that actually we can kind of track that year on year.
It's the year 2018. Here we're laying the foundations.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's start from here.
Yeah, exactly.
Because things are only going to be changing and shifting.
And I think whether you look at that regionally or sectorally or turnover wise, I think it's really important to have this information and kind of, as you say, then kind of chart the growth and see where things change. And you might find that funding the funding levels change.
I think one of the biggest things that can change, which we talk about for so long now, is when 5G comes into play properly. You see these the gray areas that aren't as active just because they are more remote. They're more urban. You don't have the connections that. So the kind of work from home DIY startups in your shed are going to be, I think, you'll see these start to kind of like bleed out like a little bit more.
And in fact, this might be a good segue because you just talked about one of the barriers, which is access to technical infrastructure.
That's why we make such a good team.
So, folks, now we shall jump to page 34.
Listeners, backtrack.
We'll be pausing now for a second while you
We're
switch to
working
that
backwards.
So on page 34, we have figure 8, which shows a very colourful bunch of blocks. It's not in colour for us because we've got black and white copies here. But still, for you it will be, hopefully.
A PDF is available.
Exactly. So this represents the heat maps of local drivers of success and barriers. So the top chart is successes, the bottom chart is barriers. And I suppose the most obvious question is, Carrie, to you. There are lots of barriers here. There are skills shortages, there's access to university knowledge, technical infrastructure challenges, a lack of advice, a lack of market knowledge, a lack of office space even. So what do you think is being done, not necessarily by KTN and Immerse UK, but include them as well, but generally in the UK to tackle these challenges for the immersive industry?
I think organisations are starting to address some of these challenges, and if you take them kind of not necessarily individually because we could be here for a long time, but if you take, for example, skills shortages, if you take that as an example, that is something that's come up time and time again over the last year through specifically through our advisory board at Immerse UK, but also through the businesses that we're engaging with on a daily basis. And so that for us was not a surprise at all that skills shortages was up there, as one of the biggest barriers, and I think is a really fundamental problem. So we are talking to organisations like Creative Skillset, who obviously are kind of more on the creative side, but we're having those conversations, flagging that actually this is this is a barrier, and actually it's a fundamental barrier that actually those organisations need to start to take note of and actually start to address. And we're also, fingers crossed, we're looking to try and draw down some funding in partnership with the AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, for those that don't know that acronym, to see whether we can draw down some funding to start to look at. I mean, this is quite a broad term, the skills shortage. I mean, what does that actually mean?
Juggling?
Yeah, exactly. So I think there needs to be some deeper analysis of what that actually means. Yeah. What are the skills shortages? Does that vary between whether you're working with immersive technology in manufacturing versus whether you're working with immersive technology in finance? What does that actually mean for the kind of immersive economy as a whole?
I smell a new graph coming on with that.
I know.
I'm feeling it.
Yeah, so I think, so that's what I mean, that kind of three short words actually is quite a complex picture. So I think it's interesting for us at Immerse UK because skills are not necessarily they're not our remit, but actually it is one of the, as we've kind of clearly stated here, it's one of the biggest barriers. So hence why we're talking to partners and trying to bring those communities together that are dealing, and their daily job is to deal with skills and training, kind of bring those together so we can try and action to action those people to kind of drive that conversation forward and hopefully try to address it.
And I think we did mention this in Immerse UK report part 1, which you can find on digitaljamsessions.com. Wait, you're already here. It's fine. Where we're seeing, I think, in our little R&D fields is, more universities bringing up these courses, and it's starting. Yeah. And for me, I know, well, I'm sure you guys might agree, it could even start from a younger age. So even in 5 years' time, they can be starting these AV courses and things like that in high school. I think and from age 12 to 16. So I kind of know that that's already starting. Look at Media Trust. Look at UCL got a whole course on it. Yeah. Ravensbourne. We love you, Ravensbourne. Our friends at Ravensbourne. But I think it'll start to be more curriculums in schools, along with the coding and development and the back end and things like that.
I think there's an interesting point. We're at an interesting juncture here, aren't we? And absolutely, I know of lots of university courses that are starting to develop specific immersive technology courses. And I've had lots of conversations about whether that's actually needed and whether the universities are teaching the skills that you need to work in the immersive sector anyway through the courses they're already delivering. And there's, I think, probably a whole other podcast there that you could do on that actual debate. So we won't
part 4.
So you don't need to go into it here, but I think that's an interesting kind of conversation about whether a specific kind of BA level immersive course is needed. So obviously we won't go into it there, but going back to your point about delivering education around immersive technology at a younger age, absolutely. I find from a diversity point of view, which this sector is struggling with at this kind of, I'm going to say at the early stage of this particular part of the VR journey, because we know it's been going on for a long time, but we're struggling with diversity. So for me, it's fundamental that this gets into schools that are, probably even younger than 12, I'd say, 5 and 6, being aware that actually, not necessarily about VR, but understanding that actually there's coding opportunities and lots of schools are
graphic
starting
design,
to do
there's motion picture,
exactly.
research, even things that people dreaming up ideas and things like that, like once upon a time.
So I think it's not just about, I don't think it's necessary to, as I say, teaching immersive technology at that age, but understanding those other kind of
the business,
just as you say, graphic design, coding, all of those really important skills that would then drive diversity within the sector. So
by the time this podcast is published, today's July 19th, 2018, and by the time it's published, I think it'll be like next Sunday, I think the 23rd of July, and on the 25th of July at Microsoft Reactor in London is the AR meetup, which Jeremy's familiar with, and it's going to be specializing in immersive in education.
Great.
So I'm going to bring this up to when I'm chairing these panels and see what happens, and then kind of like we could report back on it. So if you are listening, please register at Eventbrite AR augmented reality meetup. So let's kind of when Jeremy's going to like touch on one more thing, and then let's
last point before we move on.
Yes.
This has been interesting.
Wait, what page are you on?
The same page.
Okay, same page. Listeners, page 34.
And we've been talking a lot about skill shortages, which is one of the barriers.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at the top charts, we also say in successes, technology expertise is a success.
Yeah.
Now, that, just on the surface at least, seems to be a bit of a contradiction. On one hand, we've got success because there's technology expertise. On the other hand, we've got problems because of skills shortages. How does that all work together?
Yeah,
great question.
And I totally see why you'd see that as a contradiction. But I think what we're saying is that the UK has great technology expertise, and that is driving the market to where we are at the moment. But it's not enough. So one of the successes is absolutely we have that expertise, and we've got the economy, the UK economy has got to this point because of that. One of the successes is because of that. But it's just not enough to kind of really be. I mean, we're leading, but we could be doing better. We could be really kind of leading the global market. So I see that it's a contradiction, but it's not. We're saying one of the successes is that we have it, but it's just not enough. And actually, we need more skills and more talent and more infrastructure around skills and talent to kind of drive this even further.
In fact, it's a positive, really, in the sense that
two negatives make a positive. It's all positive.
We've got so many great people here.
Yeah, but we just don't have enough.
And there's more demand, and we need more great people. Yeah. To satisfy that demand.
Yeah, exactly, and to ensure that the market reaches its potential. I think that's the thing, and I've had, lots of kind of anecdotal conversations where people are saying, I'm employing people, but they've, employing people at a senior level, but actually they're probably only, at a more medium level, manager level with kind of lower level skills and knowledge, and actually we need that talent with that higher level skills and knowledge. And so with and that's just not, that's not just related to the immersive technology sector. I think you could probably kind of spread that out more widely, but it is having a marked impact on the immersive tech sector in particular.
So speaking of sector and people, and let's talk about how this report has affected so far. It's been out a couple months now.
It has, yeah.
The big dogs versus the little dogs.
Yeah.
So championing the big businesses and the little businesses. So I think we touched on this, so we just kind of like recap on this again.
Yeah.
How you think smaller companies and the startups can benefit
from this report. I think for those businesses it kind of underpins their decisions about where they are in the market. I think it's really important for those businesses to understand, particularly I think if you're at participant level, that actually whether you might be making decisions to move up to being a specialist, i.e. that you're going to be trying to generate all of your turnover from immersive technology. I think it's just understanding where you fit within the market and the journey of the market. I think you can find people that are still hesitant about immersive technology, and actually, is it just for the creative sector? And we know that that's not the case. Jeremy, both of you know that that's not the case. So I think it's about the little dogs. It's really fundamentally providing them with statistics and information, concrete statistics and information, not just kind of opinion. There's an official document that's had lots of research put into it. That actually, particularly going back to that funding question, that actually they can then kind of use as a basis to say, look, we know that X, Y, and Z is happening because it's in this report, and this is where we fit, and this is where our journey is. So that actually it underpins some of the decisions around funding application or supporting their their decisions to go for funding, and also whether they're looking for private investment as well.
And it'd be really interesting to see if this report has influenced anyone's business.
Yeah. I think it's definitely being talked about.
Their IP even. So it'd be so interesting. And listeners, if you read this report and you're thinking of starting a business, or like your financials, and if they've actually looked at it and went, hang on a second, maybe I should launch in Bath, or maybe I should
come down to
London.
Yeah.
Like, have they looked at this and been impacted by the results? They find that maybe I should skew this into medicine rather than.
Well, I think also if you're a small company and that actually you're working in one of those smaller regions, you might not even know that there is a community there. And I think, and we definitely have found that in Nottingham recently.
That's a great point to bring up. Yeah.
Where the council, in fact, it was one lady in particular, a lady called Faith Blakemore, that started to realise that there was a community of businesses, but they didn't know each other. And Nottingham is on this report as well. They didn't know about each other. So that community is now growing and developing, and that the council are developing a VR lab and resources and facilities directly for that community, so it can become a hub. So I think identifying that actually there is a community of businesses that are working with immersive technology can then it becomes really powerful, right? Because your businesses in numbers, and actually going back to those funding opportunities and those big projects. If we go to the funding call at the moment, Audience of the Future and the demonstrator program, that's big money. So actually, if you're a small business, actually that could be quite hard to penetrate and access. But if you've got a community around you and you've got big players with you, then actually that suddenly becomes quite exciting.
So Audience is the Future. Let's touch on that again. So describe what this is and the purpose of this.
Yeah, so it's a funding program called Audiences of the Future, and it was announced in the budget in November last year, and the funding calls have started to roll out the door from kind of April this year, and it's divided into different projects. So we've got one call has already closed, and that was the Design Foundation. So I think we had 133 applications for that. So amazing. And then the call that's open at the moment, that closes in a week and a bit, it's the demonstrator program. So there's 33 million pounds on the table, and it's been divided up into different funding calls, and the demonstrator program is for 16 million pounds. So they're looking for 4 times 4 projects, and they're around moving image, performance, sports, visitor experience. So there are lots of conversations happening within the sector at the moment. We run lots of briefing events, and we're trying to help pull consortiums together or guide people about where they might kind of find different partners to bid for that big pot of money. So that's the biggest chunk of money that's going to be coming out of that Audience of the Future program. But there will be another call in October time, which is around more kind of R&D level, and the levels of funding are lower. So there'll be up to 250 or up to 250,000, or between 250,000 and a million. So this demonstrator program is out of that funding pot, is the big boy player.
Yeah, so we're talking about the brief before, right? So
and I think just if you're trying to kind of understand and play within that funding, play with the funding opportunities, and that demonstrator program is, they're looking for really big, bold, ambitious projects. So if you're struggling to see how you might fit into that, then actually the R&D funding call that will come out later in the year could be really more applicable to you and kind of perhaps more manageable. But there's lots of opportunity, and I think it's quite exciting that the government have recognised that this is an important part of. So the money's coming out of something called the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. So a big pot of money, a big driver in terms of driving the UK economy forwards as a whole. So I think it's quite exciting that they've recognised that immersive technology within the creative sector could play a fundamental part of our industrial strategy in the UK. Yeah. And that's the first time that's happened. And I think as a sector, even though we're specifically for the creative sector at the moment, I think we should kind of take great enthusiasm and positivity from the fact that it's being recognised, and this is going to hopefully drive economic growth, and that there hopefully will be opportunity there should be opportunity for the big players and the little players. Yeah. Working together through the demonstrator programme, and then perhaps more individually on
exactly. There's so many points that we could just kind of keep touching on, maybe even like once a quarter, and just kind of like regrouping on all of this. So, and I'm making notes of the right hashtags to be putting with this podcast when we publish this. Yeah. Just to make sure that it's kind of going to be like looping in and everything.
Yeah, all of the information on Audience of the Future is on our website, so you can see there's all the webinars from the briefing sessions that we've had. And if you're not a member, then you can sign up for free on our website, and you get our monthly newsletter that tells you all, not just about Audience of the Future, but all of the funding opportunities that we know about. We know funding is difficult. We know finance is difficult, and that's one of one of the kind of conversations that we have on a regular basis at Immersive UK is where is the money?
Yeah.
Understandably, particularly if you're a small business.
I think a lot of and even people I know are really daunted by the application forms and by the process that goes with it, and they're new to it and scared. And do I have to raise this much and you match this, or how does it all work? So it's good that you have a little bit of these workshops and
so we have
Q&As. Just get some bots in there,
And that's what we're here for as well, is to help those businesses navigate that.
Yeah.
And I think for me that's been one of the most exciting bits of the audience of the future is, I mean, fingers crossed, we haven't, we don't know who's actually going to put their, name on the dotted line when they submit their proposals. But the conversations that we're having are from companies that haven't bid for Innovate UK funding before and haven't worked in a consortium like this before.
So maybe it's like a little call to get these people together that or maybe are too shy or they don't know about it. I mean,
I think it's just really exciting that if nothing else is driving new conversations and new collaborations, and even if they don't get to the point where they make the submission, there's lots of companies I know about that are making new partnerships, making new connections.
Yeah.
And actually they're finding ways of, making exciting new exciting products and services. So that's for me that's really, if nothing else.
I'm curious,
really
Jeremy,
exciting.
like in your point of view, what's your audience of the future?
Well, I'm...
or who? Or where?
What I was just thinking right now, actually.
And who are you?
What I was thinking as Carrie was talking was this decision by government to introduce this Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and have the audiences of the future is a great stamp of approval, or at least acknowledgement of the immersive industry as a whole. So maybe the reason we're seeing so many of these new players is perhaps part of the reason is a lot of these companies thought immersive technology, mainly gaming and entertainment, don't really see anything else in there, or I don't really see it as a serious thing. I see it as a fad. But the fact that we now have this official fund in place has provided it with some sense of credibility.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. And I think even if you're not working within the creative sector, you're undertaking immersive technology in other sectors, the fact that it's being recognised, I think, still is having an impact on you within those other sectors as well. And I think for us, it's going to be exciting to see how we can learn the lessons from those, from these funding calls in order into the future, and how that technology that, well, fingers crossed, will be developed as a result of this kind of R&D program kind of filter into other sectors as well to help continue drive economic growth.
And I also think because like between the three of us, we're traveling all the time. We've got, clients all over. We know lots of people in Europe, obviously. Do we mention the B word in Brexit, how this affects? Yeah. And it will. Yeah. And we know that it will. And I think that's another podcast in itself.
What are we on?
I could bring up all kinds of issues. But it's true. And it will. And I think what's also interesting to think about, like what other countries, what other governments are supporting this in parallel, not to be competing. Yeah. Ultimately, it is competing, but other ways that you can continue to work together post whatever is happening within our governmental structures, wherever you are in the world.
And we're doing some work around that as well. We know from this report as well, and from just other, PwC have recognised it as well. Yeah. The immersive market is a global market, and actually all of the, majority of them are all working in that in a global level. So, Brexit, I think you're right. I think Brexit will have an impact, but we've been undertaking some trade missions with companies. So we've been to India recently. We went to the States last year. So the KTN is undertaking some of those missions, taking companies to go and explore those potential partnerships.
Get the partnerships now.
Yeah, and I think we already know that's fundamentally important to the success of the immersive economy. So actually, we're just trying to underpin that and strengthen that, and as we know, Brexit will happen, so it's kind of helping to
quick anecdote related to that as well. Yeah. We also, I say we, as in the royal we of the British people, brought the
CBE, Jeremy Dalton, Lord Jeremy Dalton. I think you'll find.
Well, specifically not we, rather more accurately, Timothy Young from Manchester Metropolitan University brought over a delegation of South Korean.
We did.
Immersive technology companies to Manchester Metropolitan University, which I thought was a fantastic collaboration between our two great nations.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm Mookie International, so I'm representing like the whole world. So
I think that's an interesting point, isn't it? From an academic point of view, we've been talking very specifically around businesses and working kind of in the global market there, but academics have a fundamental part to play in this as well. They're bringing international students in, actually that might stay and drive the economy here.
But the R&D and the testing and experimenting. That's why I love. I'm going to plug Ravensbourne again. I never can get enough of those guys. But ultimately, it's a playground, and it's a great space to be in, whether they are the teachers or the students or people like us in the industry popping by to do a keynote for them or just a meetup or helping them out. So I know we're kind of going to be having to wrap up shortly here. So
Yeah.
I think one quick word about this. We're trying to cover a lot of those creative things and, the ultra haptics and these companies that are doing cool things. So in a quick round table, what are we thinking? Like, I do love what ultra haptics are doing, so I'm going to kind of choose with those guys. But what are the kind of biggest creative, what are the most exciting things in the creative side of things, like balancing this left brain of stats with the right brain? So
I think if you haven't seen Hold the World...
In a quick fire.
Oh, sorry, yeah. If you haven't seen Hold the World, the David Attenborough piece that was released recently with Factory 42 and others, it's a really great piece. So
cool.
I really love that. I really love that piece, and I think it does a fantastic job of bringing together kind of the museum with the creative and kind of it's a really simple idea actually at its essence, but it's so beautifully and creative and technically delivered that and I think that'd be the stepping stone to drive kind of what happens next. So,
and anything standing out for you, kind of that you think?
For me, I'm going to skew the question slightly with my experience at PwC and talk about enterprise applications, which I don't think get a lot of press, but I would argue they are creative as well. So specifically, I'm thinking about multi-user training platforms.
Yes, omnidirectional multiplayer.
For example, relating to the oil and gas industry, to bring one industry out, where we can actually have one person in a control room, two other people in completely different countries out on the virtual oil rig, and we can run any number of emergency or non-emergency scenarios and health and safety training. I think that is pretty amazing and will hopefully be adopted by more industries in the future.
Well, I think absolutely.
Yeah. Then wrapping up this digital jam session, we're going to throw out the big question, starting with you, Carrie, first. What's the biggest change that you think needs to be happening, be that cultural or technological?
That needs to be happening. I think the change is happening, and I think that actually both culturally and technology. I can't speak technically.
Just technically,
thank you. Culturally and technically, I think that there's a huge momentum at the moment. We've mentioned Audience of the Future. We've talked about this report. I think and there's other reports that I know you talked about that Digital Catapult being heavily involved in. There's a lot of momentum and conversation, and I think that change is happening. And I really hope that continues, and actually the step change that we're looking for continues, and this time next year when we're looking at the second report, that actually these graphs will have fundamentally, there would be great improvement.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
and we're gonna get this podcast to show visuals as the audio pops up.
Cool.
And what about you, Jeremy? The big question.
So you mentioned competition earlier on, Mookie.
I did, Jeremy. Yes.
And for me, at this stage, this relatively early stage in the industry's life, it's important to remember that competition is good to drive improvements, but ultimately at the end of the day, we really need to be focusing on collaboration. Even though technically on paper we may be competitors, it's important to share knowledge at this stage to ensure that we can all benefit as the industry grows.
So keep the hand holding going, and we're all kind of in the same mind right now anyway, as we are. But I think that's important to continue that and keep that going. Absolutely. So I'll mix and match all of that together and throw back related to this report the educational elements and maybe starting some of the training a bit earlier and not be afraid to get immersive technology into the classroom, even just for like a playtime area and experimenting with different ways to use it, which again, we'll touch on it at the Microsoft Reactor next Wednesday, the 25th. So that is the digital jam session for today. So going back around the table, the social handle of your choice, where our fans can reach you, Jeremy Dalton, Lord Sir Jeremy Dalton of PwC, of the Kingdom PwC.
How coincidental! I was just going to bring up my Twitter username.
What would
Jeremy
that be?
C. Dalton. It's my handle.
Dream big.
Exactly, dream for the job you want, right?
Dream for the.
My Twitter handle is at Jeremy C. Dalton, and that is my preference for you getting in contact with me.
And Carrie?
Yeah, I am at CMCW16, and then ImmerseUK is at ImmerseUK, and then with an underscore at the end.
Perfect. And as always, you can find me at Mookie Approved, and you can also follow us at Digital Jam Limited. Keep listening, keep supporting tech podcasts and new technology and funding and immersive experimentation all around the world. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
digitaljamsessions.com